Hey guys, good to see you all again. I've got a really good video coming for you all today. Sorry I haven't been able to pick up the camera lately and film for you guys. I've just had a lot going on with Prime. It's taken off like wildfire. Thank you to you guys. I also had treatment lately, so I've been recovering from that. And on top of that, I've had a lot of planning to do for my wedding coming up this October. But why don't we jump into today's video and I'll show you what I got going on. So we're going to be doing some coatings on the RM250 engine parts here. We're going to be doing a clear ceramic coat on the engine cases, as well as the flywheel cover, clutch cover, and then a colored Seracote on the power valve covers, water pump cover, inner clutch cover, and some other random stuff. And this is really cool here. I have a high temp coating that reduces friction. Going to be applying that to the exhaust valve parts. And then all of this stuff over here is going to be zinc plated to bring back that brilliant shine and protect it from all this corrosion and rust that you see on these parts already. Now the first thing we're going to tackle here are the engine cases. We already went through, cleaned them up, shined them up, got them looking good, resurfaced the gasket areas. If you want to watch the videos on those, they are on the channel. So we're going to protect the cases with a clear coat just to ensure that they don't get corroded, which honestly doesn't really happen that often, not really too common, but it's something new I want to try and share the experience with you guys. So the product I'll be using, you guessed it, Seracote. It is a ceramic clear for aluminum, so it's meant to keep that nice brushed aluminum look and protect it from any type of corrosion. So this is an air cure product. You spray it on, let it cure for 24 hours, and you're good to go. It will not yellow out or haze. Not going to ruin that beautiful brushed look that we all love. So let's see what this stuff is made of. The first thing we're going to have to do is clean up the cases, make absolutely sure there's no dirt or grime left on them, and then we can get to spraying. So over here I've got a bucket of acetone. I'm going to drop each case into the acetone. Looks like I'm going to have to shift it around to get it completely soaked. So I'm gonna let each case soak for about 30 minutes. You definitely want to throw a lid on top of that or else that acetone will evaporate pretty quickly. Now when you pull the part out, you want to make sure you have a brand new set of gloves on so you don't dirty up the case. Shake it off, and then we're gonna blow it off with the air compressor. Now there's a few areas I want to mask off, mostly the areas where the seals sit, as well as the gasket surfaces. We're all taped and plugged, and then we're going to give the case one last blow off just to make sure there's no debris left behind. Then we're going to take the case up here and set it up for spraying. Now for the product, with any Seracote air cure product, you want to shake it up really good. There's always going to be a little bit of sediment at the bottom, so you want to make sure that's all mixed in before you spray. Once you're done mixing, it's ready to go into the gun. So we're using a mini HVLP with a 0.8mm tip, and as soon as this cap opens, you want to make sure you have a pair of gloves on as well as a good respirator. I go pretty hardcore with things. I don't like messing around, so I wear a Tyvek suit as well. Man, that clear sprays out really nicely, lays out flat, and it looks like it preserves that brushed aluminum finish pretty good. So I set the gun at 30 psi and then started in the tighter areas, like inside of here, flywheel area, some of the tight spots inside of there. Just went nice broad strokes and then finished it off in the flatter areas. But yeah, looks pretty sweet. So I'm gonna go set this thing in the corner, let it cure for a full 24 hours. Meanwhile, I'm gonna get started on the other side crankcase. But one thing I should mention is when you're spraying, you definitely wanna make sure you have good ventilation. I have an exhaust fan here. Just set up some sort of fan so that way you're not breathing this crap in. So while I've got the cases over there curing, I'm gonna get to work on the flywheel and clutch cover. Now, these are made of magnesium, and magnesium is notorious for oxidizing or corroding quickly. As you can see, there is a pretty big difference between the two covers here. I just brushed the flywheel cover, while the clutch cover has been sitting for a few weeks, and you can see how quickly that oxidized. It was just sitting on the shelf in the shop. So I'm gonna have to rebrush that and then coat both of these so that way we can keep that sweet brush finish. Got both covers looking sweet again. Time to do some coatings. So I'm gonna follow the same process as I did with the cases, and I'll be using the same exact product here, Seracote Mc 5100. This will really be a good test for them since there's such a flat surface on both covers. We'll see how flat that Cerakote lays out. All right, it's the next day. Let's take a look at how these coatings turned out. So at first look, you can see the brush look is still pretty visible. It isn't quite as deep as it was before, but honestly, any type of clear coat is going to lose some depth there. But with the engine covers, like I was saying in previous videos, anything you put on these is gonna wear off. So eventually this coating is gonna wear through, but it isn't gonna be quite as visible. Say if it was black, it's gonna wear through and be very apparent. So it's kind of picking the lesser of the two evils. So I think these will look really good on the bike and should hold up really well. That MC 5100 is supposed to adhere really good to aluminum. Now for the cases, really pumped on how these came out. You can see that coating laid out really flat and smooth. Still got that brushed look to it. Now I wouldn't do a clear coat on every single aluminum part. I'm not gonna go ahead and do it on like the swing arm and linkage and brakes and all that. But for something like cases where they're hard to get to clean, you want some sort of protective coating on there to keep these things looking sweet. Next up on the list is all of these covers and the flywheel. So I'll be doing all the covers in a oven cure tungsten color. And then I'll be doing the flywheel. This thing is just ground down to bare steel. Don't want it to rust. I'll be doing that with an air cure graphite black. Step one is to blast all these parts with 100 grit aluminum oxide media and then drop them in acetone for 30 minutes to soak. With everything blasted and soaked, I'm gonna have to mask off a few things before I drop them into the oven for a preheat. So I'm gonna mask off the water pump gasket surface as well as the clutch cover, plug some of these holes, mask off the water pump on the backside, as well as these three covers. These other covers don't really matter a whole lot. And as far as the flywheel, one thing I didn't mention is you don't wanna blast inside of the flywheel. It'll mess up those magnets there. And you also don't want to run these through the oven. There's a glue that holds the magnets in, and potentially that could soften up in the oven. All right, we're all masked off and plugged up. Now keep in mind, as soon as you pull these parts out of the acetone bath, you want to throw a fresh pair of gloves on to keep things clean. And then when you're finished off masking, you want to do a little relief cut. So that way the tape doesn't shrivel up and peel off the edge. Now the next step is to throw these parts in the oven at 300 degrees for an hour. And the purpose of this is to burn off any remaining dirt, grease, or whatever might be on the surface. Now while those parts are in the oven, I'm gonna get the Cerakote ready to spray. So like I said, I'm using an H237 tungsten color. This is an oven cure. So you gotta mix it with some catalyst here. So I'm going to mix it at a 12:1 ratio with the catalyst. So for this project, I should need about 36 ounces. So I'm going to do 36 ounces of Cerakote and 3 ounces of the catalyst here in the beaker. All right, we are all ready to spray. So we're gonna shoot at 30 PSI. We're gonna attack the tighter areas first, then move to the more open areas, trying to use nice broad strokes across the part. And we're gonna do 2 coats in total. Man, I just love this stuff. It sprays out so smooth, awesome color, really consistent finish there. So after spraying, you want to let it sit for about 15 minutes before popping it in the oven for another hour. While that stuff is baking, I'm gonna get after it with the flywheel. So I've got the magnets masked off inside. You don't want to get Seracote on those. So I'll be shooting this with some C102 graphite black. This is an air cure. You gotta shake it up really, really well. There's gonna be some particles on the bottom that always need to be mixed in. So definitely take your time shaking this stuff up. And after that, just pour it straight into the gun and you are ready to shoot. This stuff is looking sick, guys. Absolutely love that color. So as soon as the parts cool down, we can handle it, peel off the tape, and give you guys a little closer look. Now for the flywheel, it's got a nice matte or flat black finish to it. Looking good. Now for the air cure, it takes about 5 days to fully cure. And at that point, we can bolt it up. Man, these came out so freaking clean. Really pumped on that color. And I actually went through and resanded these gasket surfaces once again over on the sanding glass over here. And one thing I take back from yesterday's video is I said to sand those before you do any type of coating. Honestly, it's better to sand it afterwards. That way, after sandblasting, you can make sure all that's perfectly flat. And if you get any overspray on the gasket surfaces, you can sand that off too. So let's go ahead and see how some of this stuff looks on the cover. Water pump cover is the same color. Now the clutch cover is the clear coated brushed. Let's see how this looks on here. Goes like that. Frick, man. That is so dang clean. I'm loving it. What do you guys think? I think that's pretty freaking epic. Now, one thing I wish I would have done differently on the clutch cover. If you really look close, you can see, I don't know if it'll even focus, there's a little bit of texture there. And I should have sprayed it with the cover flat like that. Actually sprayed it with it up like this, and that kind of it didn't smooth out the best, so my mistake there. If you are doing the MC5100, I would spray it with the cover flat, especially with something with a large surface area like this one. So anyways, all this stuff is ready to go, looking good. So let's move on to the next batch of parts. All right, guys, little halftime break. Got something cool to share with you all. So for those of you that have been buying these wheels, these are the cleaning wheels that go on a bench grinder or a buffing machine like those over there. I found a cool way to reuse them once they wear out. So you can cut them up into little circles like a little cleaning wheel and mount them on these adapters. So I've got an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch. The 1/8 inch one is for a Dremel, and the 1/4 inch one, bigger one, is for an air die grinder, or you could use it on a drill as well. So how these work, you basically just cut them out. When you buy one of the adapters, you get this little template. You just cut out the template, put it on here, trace it out, cut it out, poke a little hole in the middle, and mount it up on the adapter, and you can get cleaning. Works really good for getting in those tight spots, for smaller parts, and the possibilities are pretty endless with these. So I'll give you a little preview of how they work. So I'm gonna build a little 2-inch wheel here. So just cut out your template. All right, we got it cut out. Throw it on the wheel. Take a screwdriver or something sharp, poke it through the middle, poke it through the wheel there. Then we're gonna take a marker, trace around the template there, and just cut it out. Then we're gonna take our adapter, put one washer on either side of the wheel, poke it through that little hole in the center, thread the adapter on, cinch it down, and then we can pop it into the Dremel. Check this out, this is pretty freaking sweet. Holy shit. Guys, make sure you tighten down your Dremel attachments. That could have been pretty bad. Got an old shifter here. Let's see what we can do with it. As always, whenever you're using any sort of grinder or sander, you want to wear some eye protection and a respirator. Jesus, that is insane. Just a couple passes with the wheel and you got some fine looking aluminum right there. Now we've got the wheel mounted up on a die grinder and we should have pretty much the same effect, if not even better. Now that is some pretty freaking sweet looking aluminum. These wheels work awesome. So I will have the adapters up on the website, primemx.com. I'll also drop a link down below. One more thing before we get back to work on the RM. I still have more of these shirts that I did a giveaway on a couple weeks ago. So these are the ones I'd ordered in, but the neck tags got messed up. So we have a long sleeve, a short sleeve. We do have extra small, no mediums on the short sleeve, a large, no XL, and then a 2XL, and pretty much the same on the long sleeves. If I don't have your size, I will throw in one of these other shirts here. Let's go ahead and take a look at them over here. So we have a gray long sleeve, black short sleeve. These things fit really good, super comfortable, but the neck tags were sewn in at the wrong spot. Wasn't too pumped on them, so I don't really like selling things that aren't 100%, something I'm not 100% stoked on. So I will be giving these away. Now when you're on Prime, you head over to the shopping cart, got your stuff in here, scroll down a little bit, and you'll want to hit this special instructions for seller box. Punch in your shirt size, say you got a large, and that's all you got to do. So you guys have until March 3rd to submit your order. Make sure you put your shirt size in there, and I will hook you guys up. All right, let's get back to work on the RM. Oh, and about that hole, yep, I punched that. I got pissed at my printer one time. Now what we have here are all the exhaust valve parts. These are all the pieces that go in the cylinder and control the flow of the exhaust coming out the engine. Now you can see some of the coatings are starting to wear away. These are factory coatings. And so I figured, you know what, might as well do it right, recoat these parts, and I can do a few of the other parts at the same time that weren't coated from the factory, just to make them work a little better. So the coating I'll be using is another Seracote product, hard to resist. They make so many good things, but this is a P109 micro slick coating. So essentially what it is, it's an oil shedding coating, or it sheds oil. So we're not gonna have all that carbon buildup like we had before when I started with these parts. And it also reduces the amount of friction. So all these parts are working together inside the engine. You know, they're twisting, sliding, grinding on each other. And if we can reduce the amount of friction, that is gonna help them work that much better. And another thing about this coating too, it is a high temp coating, so it can withstand up to 1200 degrees. So let's start with prep. We're gonna sandblast them and just basically follow the same process as we did with the other coatings. So when you're blasting, you wanna make sure you don't spend too much time on each part. These are pretty tight tolerance parts and you don't wanna throw them out of whack. So now we're ready for the next step, and that is soaking them in acetone. So I've got the majority of these parts hung up on the rack, ready for the oven. Now a few of the parts are pretty tough to hang up. There's not really any holes anywhere to secure the wire to. And what I ended up doing was twisting some grip wire around the posts. I think that should work pretty good. So these parts are ready to drop in the oven at 300 degrees for an hour. All right, we are ready to shoot some Cerakote. So I'm gonna come over here to the micro slick, shake it up really well. I like to flip it upside down when I'm shaking it. Get all those solids at the bottom mixed in. That's very important, or else you'll have a failed coating. So I'll shake it up for about 3 minutes. Pour it straight into the HVLP, no catalyst required. Then grab a respirator, throw it on, and get spraying. So we're only going to do one coat on these. Now one coat is equivalent to less than half a thou of thickness, so it's extremely thin. We have some tight tolerances to work with here, so we're going to keep the coating pretty thin. Also, a little tip for you guys on your respirator filters: mark the date that you install them, and if you use them quite a bit, change them out once a month, and that'll keep them nice and fresh and keep your lungs in good shape. This stuff seemed to spray out pretty good, so now I'm going to toss it in the oven and let her bake at 300 for a full hour. Well folks, the microslick coating's all finished up. Looks pretty good, sprayed out nicely. Let's go ahead and test fit some of these parts, make sure all the clearances are good. Looks like that fits good. The shaft goes through this piece here. That still fits really good. And as far as the valve in the cylinder, let's go ahead and check that out. Oh yeah, you can feel a difference there. It feels like it slides pretty smoothly. What else we got here? These little valves go in the cylinder. Those ones fit nice and tight in there. Not any resistance. So yeah, everything fits great. So at this point, we are all finished up with the coatings. So throughout this video, we used a bunch of different stuff from Seracote. We had the clear for aluminum on the cases and clutch cover. And then we used the tungsten oven cure on all the other covers. That turned out really good, loved that color. And then of course for the flywheel, we had the air cure graphite black, and then the micro slick for the exhaust valve parts. So if you guys are interested in trying some of this out, you can buy it directly from Seracote. Their website is seracote.com. I will also have it linked down below. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, so the next project we're gonna tackle is all of the hardware for the engine. As you can see, it's pretty crusty and rusty, used and abused, and so we are gonna transform all of these bolts into looking like this nut with some zinc plating. So the zinc plating is going to protect the bolt from any future rust and corrosion and also give it that sweet shine. So let me show you my setup. All right guys, welcome to my meth lab. My zinc plating setup. So this is the Caswell kit. Used it quite a bit in the past. Works really well. So it looks like there's a lot going on here. All sorts of buckets, wires, power sources, all sorts of craziness, but once you break it down, it's actually pretty straightforward. So let me start from the very beginning. We have a degreaser tank, just a crock pot. That needs to be, let's see, around 150 degrees Fahrenheit. We have a bucket of distilled water, and then a bucket of 5% muriatic acid, another bucket of distilled water, and then the actual plating tank. So this has a couple things going on. It has a heater in there. It needs to be 100 degrees, somewhere around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's got an agitator, kind of like a pump setup in the back. The plating bars, one on either side. The tank bar where the parts hang from. And we have a power source. So we have a positive and negative. Positive goes to the tank bars. Negative goes to the hanging bar. And then over here we have another bucket of distilled water to wash the parts in when we're all finished up. So to break this whole process down in the simplest of terms, basically what we're doing here is getting the part ready to plate by degreasing it using an acid bath. Then we drop it into the tank. And in here, we're using the power source to attract particles of zinc onto the bolt. These plates are made of zinc. So that is how you get the protective plating on the part. It's actually particles of zinc. Obviously there's a lot more going on than just that, but that's basically the gist of it. Now, if you guys would like more info on this whole setup, last year I made a pretty in-depth video. It's like 45 minutes long on zinc plating, and I will link that video down below. Now, if you're gonna be plating used bolts like I am, you wanna make sure they're not cracked or bent before you start. So to test how they are straight, I just roll it on a table, make sure it rolls smooth. That one's good. Now I saw this one was bent before. I'll show you what it looks like when it's bent. Just kind of doesn't really roll very good on the table. So I'll need to replace that one. I'm not gonna freaking bend it back or anything. And then when I'm cleaning up the bolts, I like to look for rounded off heads and cracked or damaged threads. Now, a little safety precaution here. Whenever you're working in or around the plating tank, wear a pair of gloves, wear a respirator, and besides that, the process is actually pretty safe. Now, I know some of you are thinking, why wouldn't you just go buy new hardware? Isn't that easier? So some of this stuff can be replaced pretty easily. Like these smaller bolts are pretty standard. You can just buy them anywhere. Now, some of these are a little harder to get, like the studs. Either they're discontinued or they're pretty expensive to replace. At $5 a piece, that adds up pretty quick. There's some more specialty bolts here, like something like that. So that kind of stuff I'll replate, and the smaller stuff, the more common stuff, I'll just go into a bolt kit here. I've got a Tusk bolt kit and just find a replacement there. But for specialty things like spindles, shafts, weird bolts, this is where the plating tank really comes in handy. All right, enough gibberish. I think these tanks should be warm enough to start, so let's get to plating. So we've got a crusty batch of bolts here. These are for the crankcase. So the first step is to take them over to the buffing machine, clean them up with the cleaning wheel. That'll get all the rust off, shine them up a little bit. So basically, the shinier you can get the bolt beforehand, before plating, the better the outcome will be. Now the bolts look pretty freaking sweet, but of course if we don't do anything to them, they are just gonna rust again, and that's where the zinc plating comes into play. So now we're gonna hang them with some copper wire and drop them into the degreaser tank. So I've got about half the bolts tied up here. It's always easier to go in smaller batches. So I'm gonna drop these bolts into the degreaser tank. I'll let them soak for probably 10 minutes there. All right, we are ready to start plating. So I'm gonna pull my first batch out of the degreaser tank. We'll dip it in the first bucket of distilled water, kind of swirl it around, and then go into the muriatic acid bath. Swirl that around for 2 to 3 seconds, let it fizz up a little bit, and then into the next distilled water bath, and into the plating tank we go. So we're gonna suspend the parts in the solution here, make sure they don't touch the bottom, and you wanna make sure they are fully immersed as well. Now this is where it gets interesting and we actually start plating. So on the power supply, I've got the output button off. I'm gonna turn that on. I'm gonna have the amps around 1. And then I'm gonna slowly crank it up. Oh, going the wrong way. Crank it up until we start to see some bubbles coming up off of the bolts. As you can see, they're starting to turn black, which means the amps aren't high enough. Let's crank it up a little higher. This should be, on this one, it should be around 2, a little over 2. It all depends on the surface area of the batch you're running. I have to keep going up higher and higher. It's been a while since I've been plating. Gonna have to get back in the flow of things. Keep watching that tank. Look for a little bit of fizzing. So I ended up taking a few bolts off of the wire here. Like I was saying, it's a little easier to just have a smaller batch. So right now I am at 1.9 amps. You can see there's a little bit of fizzing going on, so we're just about right. Might need to turn it up just a tad. Check it again. So you can see those bolts are starting to turn a little more shiny compared to black. That means the plating process is taking place. So I'm gonna leave it for about 5 minutes. I'm gonna turn on the agitator here. And in 5 minutes, we should have some pretty shiny bolts. All right, 5 minutes is up. Stop the agitator. Turn off the power. Let's check these things out. Holy balls, that looks good. Frick, I love zinc plating. So I'm gonna pull them out of the tank, shake them off, drop them in the water, kind of swish them around a little bit. And then I'm gonna blow them off with an air compressor. After a little blow, I'm gonna bring them over to the drying rack. Let those things hang for a few hours. Now you don't wanna touch them right after you're done plating. It'll leave fingerprints, so let them dry. But damn, let's spend a second and just admire how freaking clean those are. All right, I think we're ready for the next batch. We've got another batch down. Sick. So this is the difference between a commercially plated bolt on the right and a bolt I just plated with the Caswell kit. Pretty big difference. Next up, we have the studs for the cylinder and cylinder head. These things are pretty crusty, so let's see what we can do with them. So a few of these studs are extremely rusty and pitted, and at this point, when it's that bad, really not worth replating. You know, if this thing is weak because of all the rust and snaps off in the case, I am dead meat. So I'm gonna replace the really pitted studs, and the rest of these I should be able to plate just fine. All right, here's what we came up with for the cylinder studs. Turned out pretty sweet, although the badly pitted one just looks terrible. Not gonna use that, but the rest of these all look pretty good, besides a little bit of blackening on the threads. That is due to using too heavy of a wire to hang them. So I would recommend using a 20 gauge wire. That seems to be the ticket. Probably be a good idea to plate the kickstart shaft and shift shaft as well. These are both just bare steel right now and would rust over time. Gonna have to take apart the shift shaft a little bit, but let's get these things shined up. Man, these look incredible. Really hyped on how they came out. Tell you what, once you get that plating kit dialed in, you can really fly through the parts and get some sweet results too. For all these tiny bolts, I'm gonna have to bead blast the heads to get inside of there and then shine them up on the buffer. Man, I got nothing else to say. Well, that is going to be it for zinc plating. Alright, I know this video is probably running a little long, so I'm going to cap it off right here, but I had a ton of fun. This is probably one of my favorite videos. I just love doing this kind of stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you did, share it with someone that you think would enjoy it or learn a thing or two. Alright, I'll see you around on the channel. Keep it prime.